Greetings, friends. This is Chris Batts, and you're listening to episode number 9 of the Future is Bright podcast. In today's episode, I spoke with Ori Solomon, Chief Legal Officer and Corporate Secretary of Resilience. We discussed his law firm years at Proskauer Rose, both in New York and Boston. We discussed the unique opportunity for him to join the transformative pharma manufacturing company Resilience during COVID. Stay till the end to hear how he learned the importance of adding value first as an associate, and also his admiration of former Proskauer Chair Joe Leshy's leadership style, and so much more. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast and leave a review on iTunes and YouTube. A bit more about Ori. Ori joined Resilience in July 2020 as their Chief Legal Officer and Corporate Secretary. Prior, Ori was co-chair of the firm-wide Emerging Companies and Venture Capital practice at Morrison & Foerster in Boston, Massachusetts, where he was a founding partner of the Boston office and also served as the hiring partner. For over 20 years, Ori has provided general corporate representation to a wide range of companies, from startups and emerging growth companies to large public companies, primarily in life sciences and tech. Ori has also represented venture capital funds in a wide range of transactions. He started his career at Proskauer Rose in New York in 1998 and transferred to their Boston office in 2011 to lead their private equity and M&A practice in the New England area. Ori has a JD from the University of Toronto Faculty of Law and an honors in business administration from the Ivey Business School at Western University in London, Ontario. Welcome, Ori, to the Future is Bright podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Ori, I wanted, and again, thank you for your time. I know you got a lot going on. Look forward to hearing this story of yours. Let's start from the beginning. So tell me a little bit about the motivation of you end up going to law school. Was there family involved? What was the influence for you to consider that?
So always family involved. So, growing up, the choices for me were doctor or lawyer. My medical career came to a crashing halt in 8th grade when I wasn't able to dissect the rabbit. So it was lawyer or nothing. I went to college, was interested in business school. I did an undergraduate business degree at my college, and then got the parental pressure to go into law school. So really, at the end of the day, I really went to law school because I think it was my father's unfulfilled ambition to go to law school. He was a CPA, but his entire life, he heard people tell him, you should be a lawyer, you'd be a great lawyer, which is something I don't even know what the hell that means when I hear it today.
Right.
So he always wanted to be a lawyer, so I ended up going to law school. And then out of law school, I decided that I needed to practice at least a couple of years. Otherwise, I would lose the benefit of having learned everything in law school. So my actual plan coming out of law school in 1998 was to do 2 years at a large law firm and then to go into investment banking. And all of my friends from undergraduate business school who had done 2 or 3 years in banking and then were off doing their MBAs.
Yeah.
And then I would join them in banking. Of course, what happened was they were analysts that got promoted directly through to associate because the dot-com boom was happening and the banks needed staff. Then the year 2000 came around, the dot-com bust. The banks fired everybody, including all my friends who were associates. So they then went to business school after 5 or 6 years at a bank rather than the typical, 2, maybe 3 years as an analyst. And I was sitting there at a law firm watching the banks fire thousands of people, realizing that I was never going to get hired by a bank until the economy recovered. By the time the economy recovered, everyone at the firm was saying, why would you go start over? You're about to make partner. So I said, okay, well, maybe I'll do this partner thing and then figure out what to do next. And, one thing led to another, and it took me over 20 years to get out of law firms.
So you ended up at Proskauer. Was that your first choice, or did you summer there? Explain to my audience kind of that journey.
Yeah, well, so I was originally from Toronto. I went to law school at the University of Toronto.
Okay.
And I summered in Toronto because the application deadlines were different. New York, the applications for New York were much earlier than Toronto. So I missed that. I summered in Toronto. But again, because it was the .com, and timing is everything in life, because there was a dot-com boom and all the firms were looking to hire, they were looking to Canada to supplement the on-campus recruiting. So there was an opportunity for folks from Canada to go work at the New York law firms that didn't exist even 2 years earlier. 1 year earlier, there was a little bit, and then my year was the year where I think 3/4 of us on the dean's list, the top 10% of the class, all went to New York, which caused a major panic in the Toronto law firm circles. But, we were delighted to have the opportunity to work in New York. It had always been a goal of mine to move to New York out of college, which was delayed by law school. So it was a thrill to be there. And to go back to your question about Proskauer, I interviewed with a bunch of firms, a bunch of AmLaw, top 20, top 30 firms. And at the end of the day, I thought that Proskauer was really the best place for me based on the people I met. And I did get an offer at another firm that, great firm. If you look at the AmLaw, it's consistently been higher on the AmLaw than Proskauer, but I don't think I would have been successful there because I think the cultural fit for me at Proskauer was much stronger. And ultimately, it was more of an instinctive decision than anything else. But I would encourage everybody who's listening that is in the process of applying to firms or thinking about lateraling firms to really, really understand the culture of the firms. And if you haven't been at a firm, I understand why all firms look similar. If you have been at a firm, you understand the culture of firms a little bit more and the differences, but you can take the top 10, the top 20 law firms, and they all have different cultures. They all have different ways of operating, different ways of approaching the practice of law, different strengths of different practice areas. And you really got to understand, and having moved firms once helped me understand this even more so. You really have to understand, the culture where you are, how much that contributes to your success or perhaps limits your success. I mean, it was a huge contributor to me, but for other folks, maybe they weren't the right fit for Proskauer. When I was the hiring partner, I would always tell folks that it was a two-way process and that we had to make sure that we were the right firm for them just as much as they were the right associate for us. So that's my answer on Proskauer.
If you could describe the culture of Proskauer, how would you describe it?
Well, I think it was very collaborative, very supportive of each other. I think I just really connected with the people there. I think, there was a lot of sort of similarities. I think we had a lot in common together. This is going back to sort of the late 90s when I started, but we just became like best friends, and there was just a lot of just like consistency in approach. But Proskauer is a tremendous place. They place tremendous premium on the quality of the lawyer, which is something that resonates with me, and it was very important that folks were at the top of their game in terms of their ability to practice law. And there used to be an expression there, I don't know if they still use it, but they used to say no paid salesman. Like they did not want the partner that would just walk around and schmooze clients, but couldn't do the work. I think, at least when I was there, and I'm sure still to this day, and anybody at the firm could do the deal themselves if they had to. They had that level of technical proficiency, and they kept that up and they kept involved in the deals. And, that resonated with me.
Ori, would you explain to my audience the type of work and clients you worked with at Proskauer?
Sure. So I sort of started at the very end of the generalist era. So when I started, I was a general corporate associate and was able to work across all the practice areas. So capital markets, M&A, a little bit of finance, even some tech transactions. And as I worked through 8 years as an associate, at the end of that time, Proskauer was around the same time organizing itself much more aggressively in distinct practice groups. And I joined what they call the private equity and M&A group, which handled strategic M&A as well as representation of private equity sponsors, buyouts, but also did work for venture capital firms and other types of private equity. People say private equity, they typically mean the typical buyout firms, like the Apollos and the Blackstones of the world. But private equity is a much broader category. So did those types of deals as well.
And I know you were there for some time. You eventually became partner, and then you also were hiring partner for the Boston office. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Now, Boston, is that their headquarters, correct, for Proskauer?
No, Proskauer is a New York firm.
New York
Proskauer
firm.
started 1875 in downtown Manhattan. And
Okay.
so it's almost 150 years now.
Okay. And so being that you were in Boston, I'm sure those are very distinct cultures between New York and Boston. And you were asked to basically screen and bring in talent to grow that office. Any stories that come to mind, or the responsibility of doing that? Was that a role that you really enjoyed?
Yeah, no, I loved it. I loved meeting with all the students. I probably met close to 200 law students a year between going on campus for 2 or 3 schools. So there you'd end up with, 20 plus at each school. And I did try to meet everybody who had a callback as well. And then some lateral candidates over the course of the year as well. But no, I really like that. One of the things that was really interesting to me, so I started in New York. I was in New York for about 13 years before I moved to the Boston office at the request of the firm. And what really surprised me when I started recruiting was that people didn't want to go to New York, because when you're in New York, you just think everybody wants to come here. So like the people who don't come here are because they can't, not because they don't want to. And I would meet folks at all the top schools, I would do on campus, at Harvard, at Penn, Cornell. And they're like, yeah, New York's too much for me. I don't want to go. And Boston was the perfect combination of a major legal market with a more manageable city and cost of living and suburbs and commuting. And it's a much more livable city, a much more higher quality of life for what you get now. Some people, myself included, prefer the excitement of New York, and it's more challenging. And if you could make it there, you could make it anywhere, and I do believe that. But for some people, they didn't want that. They were very happy to go work and practice in Boston and live in the Boston area. And some of them were from Boston, and some of them were just, I don't want to go to New York. And then when I look at the cities up and down the East Coast, Boston, Philadelphia, DC, Boston has got the most robust corporate legal market, which is really what I did the majority of my recruiting for. That office is predominantly corporate law. There's a litigation group as well, but by the numbers, they didn't hire as many as corporate did.
Yeah, makes sense. So you were at the firm for some years. Again, there's a lot of prestige with Proskauer, but you got, I guess, a phone call, and there was an opportunity for you to make a short stint over at MoFo. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, that's right. So MoFo was looking to open their Boston office. MoFo is, the gold standard in San Francisco, one of the top West Coast firms generally. But they didn't have much of an East Coast presence outside of New York. They had an office in DC that was focused on regulatory, didn't do a lot of corporate work. And they were looking to open in Boston. And, over the course of time, the way I saw the market moving and, was, you needed to be at a larger firm in terms of the practice group that you were working in. And by the time MoFo called, my practice was really what we call emerging company and venture capital work, which is serving, emerging companies, all the startups, the startup economy, and venture capital funds, the funds that invest in these companies and start them up. So for me, it was really, MoFo came along, in addition to, a global role as co-head of their emerging company venture capital group, and, a nice bump in comp. They really addressed the things that were missing for me to take my practice to the next level. One of which was being part of a much larger ECVC group that was at Proskauer. Number 2 was a very strong IP, patent prosecution, and IP transactions group, which is key because I practice predominantly in the life sciences sector and biotech in particular. I did some tech, but much more biotech and other areas of life sciences, devices, diagnostics, et cetera. And then the third was really just the opportunity to really be the first guy on the East Coast to grow this. So when you combined all of that, it just felt right. And I know you said a short stint, but it really wasn't intended to be a short stint. I mean, I think I did 21 years or so at Proskauer, and I really thought I would do another 20 years at MoFo and, call it a day. And I had talked with, colleagues and friends who had lateraled in the middle of their career and literally did, 20 years at one firm, 20 years at another firm and retired. And I genuinely thought that was going to be me.
Yep.
But, COVID happened and this company got started and sort of changed everything.
Let's talk about this company. Who is the company? How did that door open? And how did that process start? I would love to hear your story.
Sure, absolutely. So the company's named National Resilience, Inc. There's a lot of meaning in the name itself. The company was started by Bob Nelson, who's the managing partner at a venture capital firm called Arch Venture Partners. I've been working with Bob, I guess this would be early 2020. So I've been working with Bob for over a decade, helping him start, from a legal perspective, a number of companies, probably about a dozen big name companies across the biotech industry, and did hundreds of other investments for him and other venture capital firms. So he called me to start this company. He had an idea, really in response to COVID and the supply chain problems, that he was going to start a manufacturing company. And we had only ever done biotech companies and some diagnostic and device companies as well, but his bread and butter was in biotech companies, putting biotech companies together like Juno Therapeutics and Denali Therapeutics, Beam Therapeutics. You can sense the theme with therapeutics, and this was different. And if folks remember going back to March and April of 2020, that was when there was no ventilators, there was no PPE, all of these things that were being made overseas. They were in short supply in the United States, and that didn't sit well with Bob. And Bob's always one of these guys who, when he sees a problem, he attacks it. So he started calling around anybody and everybody who he knew who could help fix the problem. And he basically came up with manufacturing. And that came into greater focus to be biomanufacturing, to manufacture what we call existing modalities of advanced medicines, which are biologics like proteins and antibodies and vaccines, and then to also work on the next generation of biotech, cell therapies, gene therapies, mRNA vaccines like the COVID vaccines, which were the first mRNA vaccines ever. And so from a legal perspective, I was at MoFo and I was representing the company. I formed the company. On behalf of the company, negotiated opposite the CEO, the top three executives who are here today and run the company. And in the process of doing that, I just thought this was the most incredible company ever being put together. In terms of the folks that Bob was talking to that were like asking to be involved with the company. And you look at it, and a lot of them are on our board of directors today, and others sit as advisors. They had time limitations or other restrictions that would allow them to serve on our board. But the group of people that he was putting together was just sort of phenomenal, and the need was really incredible. There was such a need for a company like ours. There still is. But then from a legal perspective, I've always been interested in business, but all the therapeutics companies, the legal challenge is not that great. It's much more about the clinical trials, and it's much more about the science and the early R&D. And a lot of those companies are built to be bought by big pharma eventually. And some of them are built to be larger and to be their own end player. And you can see that in a lot of the companies that have been started. But that's always, once you go public, that's not always in control of the company or the board. If they get an offer, they need to consider it. But this company, we're building it to be an end player. And the scale and the scope of the legal challenge here is far greater. So I knew that there'd be a lot more to sink my teeth into in terms of like a very complex financing strategy across, equity, across debt, across different types of non-dilutive financing, government financing. We've done, sale leaseback transactions on our real estate. we were building a bricks and mortar business. So we've been doing it for almost 2.5 years now. We have over 1.5 million square feet. We have over 1,700 employees. We have pending transactions that could take those numbers up significantly if they sign and close. So there's a lot of stuff to do from a legal perspective. And we knew we were building a big company. Like a lot of the biotechs, they go public, they're 50, 100 employees. They may be like 200 or 300 employees 5 or 6 years later. We're 1,700 employees after a couple of years. So, and we're on our way to be a multiple of that in the coming years. So all of that really attracted me. And then to be there first, right? And to be able to build it from the ground up and to be a part of the executive management team that built it together was tremendously appealing. And then the icing on the cake was really the mission of the company and the purpose and the idea that we're trying to transform an industry that hasn't really changed since the 90s and that is so desperately in need of transformative change. And the opportunity for us to do that is out there. And that's tremendously appealing as well, because at the end of the day, if we are successful, and it's a big if because it's not easy, trying to transform industries never is easy, but we could look back 10, 15 years from now and really have built something of enduring value and something that is changing, not only the industry, but, patients' lives and really creating new medicines and reducing the cost of medicine in this country.
Yeah, the more you've described resilience, it sounds phenomenal because of that mission of reducing cost of manufacturing and speeding up the process, and as a national security issue that you addressed too. So exciting. Ori, knowing that you were helping make the sausage with the VC managing partner gentleman that you were talking about, did he approach you? Did you say, can I be a part of this? I mean, how did that conversation take place?
Well, so first we had to get the CEO and then the number 2 guy who's president, COO, and CFO. We had to get them in the seat in their jobs, because technically I was adverse to them until then. Once they started, then I was the company's lawyer, so they were my client. And I just put up my hand. I mean, I asked the CEO to meet with him, and I just told him I thought it was the coolest company ever. I thought it was great. I told him a little bit more about me. He had been opposite the table from me in the negotiations, so he saw a little bit about how I worked and what I was about. And obviously, he spoke to Bob, and it turns out that the number 2 guy and I have a lot of, our paths have never directly crossed, but there's a lot of folks in the biotech industry who know both of us. So he did his own due diligence on me by back checking with a bunch of people who knew about me. So, we had a bunch of conversations about what I would do, how I thought about it, how they thought about building the company. And there was just, tremendous alignment. And there still is to this day. And really just going back to where we started about the culture and the Proskauer, I mean, I feel that again here. And it's so important on the day-to-day that you enjoy the people you work with, that you respect the people you work with, that you value their input, that they value your input, that, that it's a team. And, that's absolutely what we have here. And it's a great feeling. And it makes the days where the job itself or the tasks that need to be done are challenging. It makes it that much easier knowing that you have, those folks on your team and by your side.
I love it. And it's interesting because, some people are approached by opportunities, and yet you had the inner workings and understandings, and you're like, I want to be a part of this. And that just kind of changes the motivation game and the why, and probably the commitment piece as well, as you guys will go through your own growing pains of it all. Let's transition. So, you just shared an amazing story. And frankly, I'm thinking my listeners heard a lot of really great advice in that, which is the alignment of culture and values, the things that you shared there. I want to touch on this reoccurring theme that you had shared with me, which is, wanting to be a blessing to others. Can you share a little bit about the mentor and what he shared, and how that's been reflected with your time at the firms and then now at Resilience?
No, absolutely. So, well, first, the anecdote I had told you is when I was a junior associate, I wasn't happy with the amount of my bonus, and I was complaining about it. And essentially, what the mentor said is, they said, the way to think about this is think about the value that you add, and how do you add value to every situation you're in? How do you add value to every relationship that you have? And only after you have, added value, demonstrated your worth, produced something, then go back and unabashedly ask for what you've earned. But the key is what you've earned, not what you feel you're entitled to, not what somebody else got, not what you think you need. I need $100 because I want to go buy X, or because my cost of living is Y. Like, that is not a reason to ever ask for a raise or a bonus or anything else, because that's your business. That's not your employer's business, right? Yeah. But I delivered on ABC and I have earned, X dollars. That is a perfectly legitimate argument, and that's one you should make. But it's predicated on actually achieving and delivering what it is that you said you would, or what it is that you just went about doing. So that was the advice, and it's always rung true with me that deliver first. And will there be times where you produce and you're not fully compensated for what you've done? Yeah, absolutely. And has that happened to me? Yeah, absolutely. But what I can say without doubt is, on the whole, I've been very fortunate and very lucky to have been the beneficiary of good luck, and to have been rewarded for all I've done. And sometimes you may not be directly rewarded in the moment. Like, you may have achieved a great sales goal, brought in a big client, and your bonus or your bump in salary didn't reflect that accomplishment. But bringing in that one client, brought in 2 other clients, and then you got the big bonus or the big raise. Or those other clients, you really enjoy working with, and they start a company and you go work at that company. There's just so many ways that a career evolves over time. I think if you always guide yourself by thinking about how you can add value, thinking about how you can help others in a relationship. A different mentor told me, he used to always start conversations with clients with some version of, how can I help you? Right? Sometimes it was like, what's on your mind? Or sometimes it would be like, how are you doing? But he would mean it, genuinely, like, how are you doing? And sometimes it would extend to any part of your life, like your family life, not just your professional life at your job, but, your professional life. Maybe you're looking to transition your career. When you're a partner in an outside law firm, that's sometimes something that you can help with. So it's always, how can you help others? And I think when you help others, then implicitly they have a desire to want to come back and help you. And that, by just creating all of that goodwill and across a large group of people, many people will take, and you'll never hear from them again. But that's fine. Maybe you've inspired them to help somebody else, maybe not, but you can't focus on that. And I think if you just think about the broader theme, I always like to say the arc of the universe is long, and what goes around comes around, and sometimes in unexpected ways, and it could be years later.
And so, Ori, you're very modest. You have an exciting, wonderful career. The chips have fallen, very fairly towards you. I'm assuming you've poured yourself into young people, including attorneys at Proskauer. Is that correct? You've probably done some mentoring.
Yeah, no, there's no greater feeling than seeing the folks that I recruited or the folks that I mentored. Proskauer has very strong mentorship programs. It's one of the things that we recruited on. They did a bunch of things, and they still do them, to my knowledge. They were very smart in terms of how they matched mentors with mentees, and they were very good at creating strong mentorship relationships and supporting those and encouraging those. And when I look back at a lot of what has been accomplished and where some of my mentees are, it's like tremendously rewarding to see them to be successful. And some of them are partners at firms, Proskauer or other firms. Some of them are, senior in-house lawyers at various companies of all types and sizes. So it's been very rewarding from that perspective. If
you were to give advice to, say, a senior attorney, who could have the opportunity to mentor others and or a junior attorney looking for a mentor, what advice would you give them?
So like any relationship, it has to work for both parties. And I think what I would say is start out by thinking about what you want to get out of the relationship and what you can contribute to the relationship, and make sure that there's alignment there. And I think it can be a hard conversation to have, but I think that a transparent conversation around what it is that you can give and what it is that you're looking for in the relationship. And, I think it's a little one way in the sense of like what the mentor can give and what the mentee is looking for. But, just simple example, if the mentee is looking for, a weekly lunch that's, mostly social, but covers, a full range of topics, and the mentor is like, well, I really just want to answer one-off questions in email at my convenience, then that's just not going to work, right? And if the goals of the mentee are not aligned with what the mentor can provide, then it's not great. So I would say make sure there's alignment around, what both parties can contribute and what both parties are looking to get out of their relationship.
Yeah. Ori, I want to pivot for a second, and I want to talk about just leadership in general. How do you define leadership, and who have been examples of leadership for you?
So to me, leadership is what you do and the way you conduct yourself in the tough times and in the rough times, right? Like anybody can be, magnanimous and, a nice guy and a great guy, and when everything is going well, right? But when things aren't going well, how do you react to that? How do you help your team? How do you guide the direction and accomplish the result that you need? Is, to me, that's the true test of a leader.
And have you seen examples in that in your career?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, so I don't know if we should call out people by name here or not, but I mean,
you're welcome to if you want. It's up to you.
Well, I mean, like the best example, I mean, there's a couple. One would be at Proskauer, Joe Lasessi was the chairman of the firm. Sure. And I just think he got everything right for a decade. And I think he was a tremendous leader. I think he was tough when he needed to be tough. I think he was compassionate when he needed to be compassionate, empathetic. He took the time to understand situations, incredible business focus as well, business-minded, strategic. And he made decisions that I may not have made myself, but I always respected them and always thought, ultimately, I think they were the right decision, even if they weren't the best thing for me personally. So I thought that he was a tremendous leader. Then I had a client, he was the CEO, he still is the CEO of financial technology startup company that literally he started himself. He actually came to Proskauer with basically the back of an envelope idea of a business plan, and he built that into a public company that I think today is worth about $15 or $20 billion. I mean, it's down a bit, but and is a critical part of the financial system today. And it's just, again, his ability, just seeing him in the boardroom for 20 years and his ability to just lead the company through any type of challenge, the early growth years, the global financial crisis, through 08, through 010, grow the company, and just, quarter after quarter after quarter, just deliver on results for shareholders, lead the business, make all the right strategic decisions, coalesce agreement among different stakeholders in the financial industry. I'm generalizing a little bit, but his ability to do all of that was just, incredible, and always a pure gentleman at the end of the day, which, again, I think that is completely underrated in today's world. Just an old fashioned gentleman, people know what that means.
Yeah. Ori, wanting to bring this to a close, and I so appreciate your time. How can people find you, contact you, follow you on social media?
Sure. So I'm not much for the social media. I think the best way to find me would be on LinkedIn under Ori Solomon. I don't think there's a lot of us out there, but if you you search me in current employer of resilience, you'll find me.
Very good. Ori, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for making time today. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. It's a pleasure.